An AI asks Jungkook to speak the name that matters most. What follows is a haunting song that makes Jimin realize the truth he feared. Say the name that means the most to you. The studio lights dimmed as if the room itself held its breath, and for a split second, Jungkook didn't answer. The AI composer's interface flickered across the glass screen, soft blues and pulsing waveforms that mimicked a heartbeat. It was supposed to be a simple test, a new tool, experimental, unpredictable, designed to translate emotion into melody. The producers stood behind the glass wall, murmuring with quiet anticipation, their reflections ghosting over the dim interior of the recording booth. Jungkook exhaled slowly, his fingers tightening around the headphones hanging loosely around his neck. His pulse felt too loud, too present, like it might leak into the microphone even before he spoke. Just one name, the system prompted again, its voice eerily calm, almost human. The name that carries the strongest emotional weight. He swallowed. Across the room, leaning casually against the mixing console, Jimin watched him. At first, it was nothing unusual, just another late-night session, another creative experiment. Jimin had been half-smiling, arms crossed, his posture relaxed in that effortless way he carried himself when he was trying not to overthink things. But something shifted. Maybe it was the silence stretching too long. Maybe it was the way Jungkook's gaze dropped, not toward the floor, not toward the mic, but somewhere deeper, somewhere internal, like he was standing at the edge of a memory he wasn't sure he should step into. Jungkook, one of the producers, said gently through the intercom, "Whenever you're ready." The air felt heavier. Jungkook closed his eyes. For a moment, there was only the faint hum of electricity, the distant city noise bleeding through the insulated walls, and the subtle rhythm of breath, his, uneven and unsteady. Then, almost too soft to exist. Jimin. The name barely left his lips, but the system caught it instantly. Waveforms erupted across the screen. Jimin froze. At first, it didn't register. Names were just names, right? They'd known each other for years. Of course, his name could come up naturally. It didn't have to mean anything more. But the way Jungkook said it. It wasn't casual, it wasn't playful, it wasn't even conscious. It sounded like something that had been buried too deep, dragged to the surface before it could be softened, filtered, or hidden. The AI processed the input. Emotional data received, it responded, generating composition. And then the music began. It started with a single note, low, trembling, almost hesitant, like a confession that didn't know how to begin. Jimin's chest tightened. The melody built slowly, layering soft piano with distant strings that sounded like they were echoing through an empty hall. It wasn't polished. It wasn't perfect. It felt raw, fragile, like it could break if anyone breathed too loudly. Jungkook opened his eyes, and the moment he heard it, something in his expression cracked. Because it wasn't just music. It was him. The lyrics followed, forming in real time on the screen, each word appearing as if pulled straight from a place Jungkook had never dared to touch out loud. I kept your name in silence, asterisk. Between the spaces of every song, asterisk. Where no one listens long enough to hear what I've been hiding all along, asterisk. Jimin's breath hitched. No, this wasn't. He pushed himself off the console, stepping closer to the glass without realizing it. His reflection overlapped with Jungkook's figure in the booth, the two images merging in a way that felt too symbolic, too intimate. Inside, Jungkook stood completely still. He hadn't moved, hadn't spoken, but his eyes were locked on the lyrics, wide with something dangerously close to fear. You were never just a moment. Never just a passing light, asterisk. You were the reason I kept singing. When the world went quiet at night, asterisk. The producers stopped talking. The room fell into a silence, so complete it felt almost sacred. Jimin's mind raced, trying to rationalize it, trying to pull it apart piece by piece, and make it something harmless. It's just AI, it's just data. It's interpreting tone, context, emotional weight. It doesn't know anything. It doesn't mean anything. But the song felt too specific, too precise, like it wasn't creating something new, but uncovering something that had always been there. Jungkook took a shaky step back from the microphone. "Stop it," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. The system didn't respond. The music continued. "If I say your name too loudly, will it shatter what we are? Or will it finally reveal? You've been my truth from the start asterisk." Jimin's heart slammed against his ribs. His fingers curled into fists at his sides, nails pressing into his palms as if grounding himself would somehow steady the sudden rush of emotion flooding through him. He didn't want to look at Jungkook, but he couldn't look away, because Jungkook looked like he was falling apart. There was something raw in his expression now, something stripped bare, unguarded, like the music had peeled away every layer he'd carefully built over the years. "Turn it off," Jungkook said again, louder this time. Still, the AI continued. "Composition nearing completion," it replied. Jimin moved before he realized he was moving. The door to the recording booth opened with a soft click, the sound almost swallowed by the swelling music. He stepped inside, the air immediately warmer, thicker, filled with the sound of something that felt too personal to exist in a shared space. "Jungkook." His voice was quiet, careful, like he was approaching something fragile that might break if he said the wrong thing. Jungkook didn't turn around. "Don't," he said, his voice strained. But it was too late. The final lines appeared. "If this is wrong, then let me fall. If this is truth, then let it be asterisk. Because the name I never say asterisk has always been you." The music cut off. Silence crashed into the room. For a moment, no one moved. No one spoke. Even the city outside seemed to fade, leaving only the echo of what had just happened hanging in the air like something unfinished. Jimin's throat felt tight. He didn't know what to say, didn't know what he was allowed to say, because whatever this was, it had crossed a line neither of them had ever acknowledged out loud. "Jungkook," he tried again, softer this time. Slowly, Jungkook turned. And the look in his eyes. It wasn't denial. It wasn't confusion. It was recognition. Like he had just heard something he had always known, but never wanted to face. "I didn't write that," Jungkook said, his voice hollow. Jimin nodded faintly, even though the answer didn't help. "I know." But the truth settled between them anyway, heavy and undeniable. Because even if the AI had written the song, it had needed something to draw from. And whatever it found inside Jungkook, it had been real enough to sound like a confession. The silence didn't end, it shifted. It lingered in the studio like something alive, pressing against the walls, crawling under skin, refusing to dissipate even after the music had died. Jungkook didn't move. Jimin didn't either. They stood there, only a few feet apart, yet the distance between them felt wider than anything either of them had ever crossed. "Say something," Jimin finally whispered, but his voice carried a sharp edge beneath it, something restless, something unraveling. "You can't just stand there like that after this." Jungkook let out a hollow laugh, but it wasn't humor, it was disbelief, raw and jagged. "What do you want me to say?" he shot back, his voice rising just enough to crack the stillness. "That it's just a coincidence, that the system randomly decided to, write a song that sounds exactly like something I've been trying not to think about for years." Jimin flinched. Not visibly, not dramatically, but something in his expression faltered, something small and fleeting that Jungkook noticed anyway. "That's not what I'm saying," Jimin replied, more quietly now, but his tone tightened. "I'm saying it's AI. It pulls patterns, emotions, fragments. It doesn't know what it's doing." Jungkook's eyes darkened. Then why does it sound like it knows me better than I know myself? The question hung there, heavy and dangerous. Outside the booth, the producers shifted uneasily, their earlier excitement replaced with something closer to discomfort. One of them reached toward the console, hesitating before muting the system entirely, as if afraid that even the machine might say something else it shouldn't. Inside, the air felt too warm. Jimin took a slow breath, running a hand through his hair, a habit he had when he was trying to think. Trying to stay composed when everything inside him wanted to react too quickly. "You're overthinking it," he said, though the words didn't come out as steady as he intended. "It took one input, my name, and built around it, that's all." Jungkook shook his head immediately. "No," he said, sharper this time, "don't do that." "Do what?" "Pretend this is nothing." Jimin's jaw tightened. "I'm not pretending anything." "You are," Jungkook insisted, stepping closer now, his voice dropping but intensifying like something barely contained. "Because if you weren't, you'd be asking the same question I am." "And what question is that?" Jimin challenged, though something in his chest had already begun to twist painfully, like he knew exactly where this was going and didn't want to follow it. Jungkook held his gaze. "Why you?" The words landed harder than anything else had. Jimin blinked, caught off guard, not by the question itself, but by the way Jungkook said it. There was no accusation in it, no anger, just something raw, something vulnerable, something that made it impossible to brush off. "I don't know," Jimin admitted, too quickly, his voice quieter now. "Maybe because we've known each other the longest, maybe because we work together all the time, maybe because—" "Stop," Jungkook cut in, his voice breaking slightly. "Don't give me excuses." "That did it." Jimin's composure cracked. "Then what do you want from me?" he demanded, stepping forward now, closing the distance between them until there was barely space to breathe. "You think I don't hear it too? You think I didn't feel how specific that was?" His voice wavered at the end, betraying him. Jungkook's expression softened for a split second, just enough to reveal the same fear reflected back at him. "Then why are you acting like it doesn't matter?" Jungkook asked, quieter now, almost pleading. Jimin looked away. "Because it did matter. That was the problem. It mattered too much." "You don't get it," Jimin said, his voice low, strained, like he was forcing each word past something lodged in his throat. "If we start thinking like that, if we start believing something like this means anything real, then what happens next?" Jungkook didn't answer immediately. He just watched him. And that silence, it said more than words could. Jimin let out a shaky breath, laughing bitterly under it. "Exactly," he murmured, "we don't get to have that answer." Something in Jungkook snapped then, not loudly, not explosively, but in a way that felt far more dangerous. "You think I haven't asked myself that already?" he said, his voice suddenly steady in a way that felt unnatural, like he had crossed a line inside himself. "You think I haven't spent years trying to figure out where the line is, what's okay to feel, what's not, what I'm allowed to say, and what I have to bury?" Jimin's eyes flickered back to him, wide. "Years." That word echoed louder than anything else. "Jungkook," he started, but whatever he meant to say dissolved before it could form. "Do you know what the worst part is?" Jungkook continued, a faint, humorless smile touching his lips. "It's not that the AI said it, it's that it said it exactly the way I would have, if I ever had the courage to." Jimin's chest tightened so sharply it almost hurt. "Don't," he whispered, shaking his head slightly, "don't say things like that." "Why not?" Jungkook challenged, stepping even closer, his voice dropping to something softer but infinitely more intense. "Because it makes it real." Jimin's breath caught. "Yes," he admitted, barely audible. The word changed everything. For a moment, neither of them moved. The distance between them was gone now, completely gone, close enough to see every flicker of emotion, every hesitation, every unspoken truth reflected in each other's eyes. And in that moment, there was no stage, no cameras, no producers watching from the other side of the glass. Just them. Just the truth they had both been avoiding. Jungkook swallowed, his voice quieter now, almost fragile. I didn't mean for it to come out like this. Jimin let out a soft, broken laugh. That's the problem, he said. You didn't mean for it to come out at all. The words weren't cruel, but they hurt anyway. Because they were true. Jungkook looked down briefly, then back up again, his gaze steady despite everything. So what do we do now? Jimin didn't answer immediately. He wanted to. He wanted to say something simple, something safe, something that would put everything back where it belonged, neatly tucked away, untouched, unspoken. But the song was still echoing in his mind. Every word, every note. And the way Jungkook had said his name. I don't know, Jimin admitted finally, his voice softer than before, stripped of all defenses. Because if I'm honest. He hesitated. Jungkook didn't look away. I think a part of me already knew, Jimin finished, his voice barely above a whisper. The confessions settled between them, quieter than the song, but infinitely louder in meaning. Jungkook's breath hitched slightly. Not in shock, not in surprise, but in recognition. And for the first time since the music started, the truth didn't feel like something distant or abstract. It felt immediate, real, unavoidable. Outside the booth, someone finally spoke, their voice cautious through the intercom. Should we continue the session? Neither of them responded. Because in that moment, nothing outside that room felt relevant anymore. The system remained dark. But whatever it had awakened wasn't. The door slammed harder than it should have. Jimin didn't remember pushing it that forcefully, but the sound cracked through the hallway like a gunshot, turning heads from staff who had no idea what had just unraveled inside that studio. The fluorescent lights outside felt harsher, colder, too real compared to the suffocating intimacy he had just escaped. He kept walking. Fast. Too fast. Jimin, wait. Jungkook's voice chased him down the corridor, breathless, urgent. Footsteps followed, quick and uneven, until a hand caught his wrist. Jimin stopped. Not because he wanted to, but because he couldn't not. Let go, Jimin said, his voice low, controlled in a way that made it more dangerous. Jungkook didn't. Not until you stop running. Jimin let out a sharp breath, turning back, eyes flashing. I'm not running. You walked out like the room was on fire, Jungkook shot back. If that's not running, then what is it? Jimin yanked his wrist free. It's called knowing when something is about to ruin everything. The words hit harder than either of them expected. Jungkook blinked, taken aback, not by the meaning, but by the certainty behind it. Ruin, he repeated, quieter now, like he needed to hear it again to believe it. Jimin's jaw clenched. Yes, he said, ruin. The hallway suddenly felt too narrow, too exposed. People were there, passing by, pretending not to look, but listening anyway. Always listening, always watching. That was the problem, that had always been the problem. Jimin lowered his voice. You think we can just stand there and say things like that? He continued, leaning closer, his tone sharp but trembling underneath. You think nothing changes after that? Jungkook didn't answer immediately. Because something had already changed. I think it already has, he said. Jimin shook his head immediately. No, it doesn't have to. That's not your decision to make alone, Jungkook replied, and there was a quiet firmness in his voice now, something steady, something unyielding. Jimin stared at him. For a second, just a second, something vulnerable flickered across his face again, something dangerously close to breaking. But then it was gone. Yes, it is, Jimin said, more coldly than before. Because I'm the one who has to deal with the consequences when this goes wrong. Jungkook frowned. When this goes wrong. When, not if, Jimin corrected. The certainty in his voice strung. Jungkook took a step back, like he needed space to process that. So that's it, he asked, a faint edge creeping in. You've already decided how this ends. Jimin didn't hesitate. Yes. The word landed like a final verdict. Something inside Jungkook tightened. Then why did you say you knew? He asked, his voice dropping quieter but heavier now. Back there, you said a part of you already knew, so what was that? Just another thing you're going to pretend never happened. Jimin looked away. And that, more than anything, felt like an answer. Jungkook let out a soft, disbelieving laugh. Wow, he muttered, you're really good at this. At what? Jimin snapped, his patience finally cracking. At acting like you don't feel anything. That hit. Jimin's head snapped back toward him, eyes sharp. You don't get to say that. I do when I'm standing here telling you the truth, and you're acting like it's a mistake. It is a mistake, Jimin shot back, louder now, drawing a few more glances from the hallway. He lowered his voice again quickly, but the intensity didn't drop. It's a mistake to let something like this exist, where it can destroy everything we've built. Jungkook stepped closer again, frustration bleeding through now. Or maybe it's a mistake to keep pretending it doesn't exist at all. Because pretending keeps things intact, Jimin argued. Pretending means we don't lose. Lose what? Jungkook interrupted. Jimin froze. The question wasn't loud. But it was devastating. Everything, Jimin said finally, his voice quieter now, but no less intense. You, me, us, as we are now. Do you think we survive this? Do you think we just go back to normal after saying things like that? Jungkook didn't answer right away. Because he knew the answer. No, he admitted. Jimin nodded, like that proved his point. Exactly. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't face it, Jungkook added. Jimin let out a frustrated breath, running his hands over his face. Why are you doing this? He asked, his voice cracking slightly. Why now? Jungkook hesitated. Because the answer wasn't simple. Because I'm tired, he said finally. Tired of holding something that feels this heavy and acting like it weighs nothing. Jimin's expression softened for a brief moment. Too brief. You think I'm not, Jimin whispered. That changed everything. Jungkook blinked, caught off guard. What? Jimin laughed softly, but it was hollow, almost bitter. You think you're the only one who's been dealing with this, he said. You think you're the only one who noticed things changing or feeling things you should. The words hung between them, fragile and explosive at the same time. Jungkook's heart pounded. Then why are you pushing it away? He asked softer now. Jimin swallowed. Because I know what happens if I don't. Their eyes met again. And this time, there was no denial left. Only fear. And something else. Something far more dangerous. Jungkook took a slow step closer, his voice dropping almost to a whisper. Say it. Jimin shook his head immediately. No. Say it, Jungkook repeated, more firmly. I said no. Why? Jungkook pressed. Because saying it makes it real, Jimin snapped. The same words from before, but now they sounded different, less defensive, more desperate. Jungkook's gaze didn't waver. It's already real. The truth settled between them again, heavier than before. Jimin's breathing became uneven, his composure slipping despite every effort to hold it together. You don't understand, he said. If I say it out loud, there's no going back. Jungkook's voice softened. Maybe there is. That silence again. But this time, it wasn't empty. It was full of everything they hadn't said for years. Jimin closed his eyes briefly, like he was trying to steady himself against something inevitable. When he opened them again, they were different. less guarded, more honest. You're asking me to risk everything, he said quietly. Jungkook shook his head. No, he replied, I'm asking you to stop lying to yourself. Jimin let out a slow breath, his shoulders dropping just slightly, like the fight was starting to drain out of him. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The hallway noise faded into the background. And then, I feel it too. The words were barely audible. But they changed everything. Jungkook didn't move, didn't breathe, like even the slightest movement might break the moment. Jimin looked at him, really looked at him this time, without the walls, without the careful distance. I hate it, Jimin added, a faint, broken smile forming. I hate how much it matters. Jungkook's chest tightened. Then why does it sound like you're relieved? He asked softly. Jimin let out a quiet laugh, shaking his head. Because I'm tired too. The confession lingered in the space between them, softer than the arguments, quieter than the tension, but infinitely more powerful. Jungkook stepped closer again. Not rushed, not forced, just enough to close the distance that had existed for far too long. And now, he asked. Jimin hesitated. For a long moment. Before answering. Now we deal with it. And for the first time since the music started, the truth didn't feel like something they had to escape. It felt like something they had finally stopped running from. The night didn't end, it unraveled. By the time they stepped outside, the air felt colder than it should have been, sharp against skin, like the world had shifted just enough to make everything unfamiliar. The city lights blurred in the distance, neon reflections trembling across wet pavement, and for a moment neither of them spoke. Jimin exhaled slowly, staring straight ahead. Say something, Jungkook murmured, his voice quieter now, stripped of the earlier intensity, but no less heavy. Jimin let out a soft, humorless laugh. You've said enough for both of us tonight. That's not fair. Jimin turned to him then, eyes tired but clear. No, he said, what's not fair is you dropping something like that in the middle of a session and expecting me to just stand there like it doesn't change everything. Jungkook's jaw tightened. I didn't plan it. But you felt it, Jimin shot back. That's worse. The words lingered. Jungkook looked away briefly, running a hand through his hair, frustration simmering just beneath the surface again. Why does it have to be worse? He asked. Why can't it just be honest? Jimin shook his head immediately. Because honesty doesn't protect anything, he said. It destroys things. It exposes things that were safer hidden. Jungkook stepped closer, his voice low. Safer for who? For everyone, Jimin replied without hesitation. For the team, for the people watching us, for everything we've built. And for you, Jungkook pressed. Jimin hesitated. That hesitation said more than any answer. Jungkook's expression softened slightly, but there was still something burning underneath. You keep talking about everything else, he said quietly, but you're not saying what it actually does to you. Jimin looked at him, something flickering behind his eyes again, conflict, fear, something deeper. You really want to know? He asked. Yes. The answer came without pause. Jimin swallowed, his throat tightening. It terrifies me, he admitted, his voice low and raw, because I don't know how to control it. The honesty hit harder than any argument. Jungkook didn't interrupt this time. Didn't push. He just listened. Jimin let out a slow breath, staring down at his own hands like they might hold the answer. I've always known where the lines are, he continued. What's okay, what's not, what to show, what to hide. I know how to keep things balanced. His voice wavered slightly. But this doesn't follow any of those rules. Jungkook's chest tightened. Maybe it's not supposed to, he said softly. Jimin laughed again, quieter now, but there was no humor in it. That's easy for you to say. Why? Because you're the one who finally let it out, Jimin replied. You crossed the line already. Jungkook's expression shifted. Don't act like you haven't been standing right on it with me this whole time. Jimin didn't answer. Because he couldn't. A car passed by, headlights briefly illuminating them before fading into the distance. The world kept moving, unaware, indifferent. But for them, everything had slowed to a fragile, dangerous stillness. You said we deal with it, Jungkook said after a moment, so let's deal with it. Jimin looked at him, wary. And how exactly do you think that works? Jungkook hesitated. Because he didn't have a perfect answer. I don't know, he admitted, but pretending it didn't happen isn't dealing with it. Jimin exhaled sharply, and diving straight into it is. It's at least honest. Jimin's gaze hardened slightly. Honesty doesn't erase consequences. Jungkook stepped closer again, his voice steady now, and fear doesn't erase feelings. The tension snapped back into place. Not explosive, but tight, unrelenting. Jimin's chest rose and fell unevenly, his control slipping in small, almost invisible ways. You're asking me to gamble everything on something we don't even understand, he said. Jungkook shook his head. No, he replied, I'm asking you to admit you already understand it. Jimin's lips parted slightly, but no words came out. Because that was the truth he couldn't argue against. Silence stretched between them again, heavier now, but also clearer, like the confusion from before had burned away, leaving only the core of it behind. Jungkook took another step closer. This time, Jimin didn't step back. You said it scares you. Jungkook murmured, it scares me too. Jimin's eyes flickered. But running from it doesn't make it disappear, Jungkook continued. It just makes it stay unfinished. Unfinished is better than broken, Jimin whispered. Jungkook shook his head slightly, not always. Jimin looked at him, searching his face like he was trying to find something. Certainty, reassurance, anything solid enough to hold onto. What if we lose everything? Jimin asked quietly. Jungkook didn't hesitate this time. Then at least we won't lose this, without ever knowing what it could have been. The answer was simple. Too simple. But it landed with a weight that was impossible to ignore. Jimin closed his eyes briefly, his expression tightening as if he was bracing himself against something inevitable again. When he opened them, they were softer, more vulnerable. You make it sound easy, he said. It's not, Jungkook replied. It's just worth it. The words lingered in the cold air between them. Jimin's defenses wavered again. And this time, they didn't rebuild as quickly. You don't even know what this is, Jimin said, quieter now. Jungkook met his gaze without hesitation. I know what it feels like. Jimin's breath caught slightly. That's not enough. It is for me. That was the difference. And they both knew it. Jimin looked away again, but this time it wasn't avoidance, it was hesitation. Conflict. The kind that comes when the truth is too close to deny, but too dangerous to fully accept. Say it again, Jungkook said suddenly. Jimin frowned slightly. Say what? What you said earlier. Jimin's expression tightened. Don't do this. Say it, Jungkook repeated, his voice softer now, but insistent. Jimin hesitated. Longer this time. The city noise filled the silence, distant traffic, a faint hum of life continuing around them, oblivious. And then, finally, I feel it too. The words came out steadier this time. Clearer. No hesitation left in them. Jungkook exhaled slowly, like he had been holding his breath for far too long. Then stop acting like it's something we have to hide from ourselves, he said. Jimin shook his head slightly. You don't get it, he murmured. It's not just about us. Then what is it about? Jungkook asked. Jimin looked at him, something heavier settling into his expression now. It's about what happens when this stops being just ours. The implication hit immediately. Public exposure. Everything they had built being seen through a different lens. Jungkook's jaw tightened slightly. So we're supposed to live like this forever? He asked, knowing but never saying anything. Jimin didn't answer. Because that had been his plan. Jungkook let out a quiet, frustrated breath. That's not living, he said. It's surviving, Jimin replied. Jungkook stepped even closer now, his voice dropping. I don't want to just survive this. Jimin's heart pounded. He could feel it. The shift. The edge. The moment where things could either pull back or fall forward completely. You're asking for something we can't control, Jimin said softly. Jungkook's eyes didn't waver. Maybe, he admitted, but I'm asking for it anyway. Jimin's breath caught again. And for a moment, everything stilled. No arguments. No defenses. Just the space between them, filled with something unspoken but undeniable. Jimin searched his face one last time, like he was looking for a reason to stop. But all he found was certainty, and something that felt dangerously close to hope. You're not going to let this go, are you? Jimin asked quietly. Jungkook shook his head. No. Jimin let out a slow breath, his shoulders dropping just slightly. Then we do this carefully, he said. No rushing, no reckless decisions. Jungkook nodded. Together, he added. Jimin hesitated. Just for a second. Together. And for the first time, the tension didn't feel like something tearing them apart. It felt like something pulling them forward, uncertain, complicated, but real enough that neither of them could pretend it wasn't there anymore. The next morning didn't bring clarity, it brought consequences. Jungkook knew something was wrong the moment he stepped into the building. The atmosphere had shifted, not dramatically, not in a way anyone could immediately point out, but it was there, subtle and suffocating. Conversations stopped a fraction too late when he walked past. Glances lingered a little too long before darting away. Even the air felt different, like it carried something unspoken. He barely made it halfway down the hallway before one of the managers called his name. Jungkook, meeting room, now. No greeting, no explanation. Just that. His stomach tightened. Inside the room, the tension was thicker. 3 people sat at the table, their expressions carefully neutral in a way that immediately made everything worse. A tablet lay in the center, screen dark, waiting. Jungkook closed the door behind him. What's going on? He asked, though he already had a feeling. One of the managers gestured to the chair. Sit. He didn't. Just tell me. A brief glance passed between them, silent communication, before one of them finally tapped the tablet. The screen lit up. Audio. Familiar audio. Jungkook's breath caught. Jimin. His own voice. Soft. Unmistakable. The rest followed. The music, the lyrics, every raw, unfiltered word that had never been meant to leave that room. For a moment, the world tilted. How Jungkook started, his voice rough, but it broke before he could finish. We are trying to figure that out, one of the managers said, their tone controlled but tight. But right now, that's not the most immediate problem. Jungkook's chest tightened. Where is it? Another tap. A video clip this time, not official, not polished. A recording of a screen, someone had captured it during the session. The audio was slightly distorted, but the meaning was crystal clear. And the caption. When AI exposes what idols try to hide. Jungkook felt something drop in his chest. How many people have seen this? Enough, came the reply. That single word carried too much weight. Jungkook ran a hand through his hair, packing once before stopping himself. We can take it down, he said quickly. Report it, block it. It's already spreading. Of course it was. Something like that, it wouldn't stay contained. Jungkook's mind raced, thoughts colliding, overlapping, none of them settling long enough to form a solution. And Jimin, he asked suddenly, his voice sharper now, does he know? The silence that followed told him everything. I'm telling him now. Without waiting for permission, Jungkook turned and walked out. Jungkook, someone called after him, but he didn't stop. He couldn't. The hallway felt longer than before, every step heavier, faster. His pulse roared in his ears, drowning out everything else. The only thought that mattered was finding Jimin. Before someone else did. Before this became something bigger than they could control. He found him in one of the practice rooms. Alone, but not untouched. Jimin stood in the center, phone in hand, his expression unreadable, but his stillness said everything. He already knew. The door slammed open harder than Jungkook intended. Jimin didn't flinch. You saw it, Jungkook said, breathless. Jimin let out a quiet breath, not quite a sigh. Hard not to, he replied, his voice calm in a way that didn't match the situation. That calmness made Jungkook uneasy. How bad is it? Jungkook asked. Jimin tilted his phone slightly, showing the screen. Thousands of comments. Speculation. Clips looping over and over again. People dissecting every word, every tone, every glance. Jungkook felt sick. They're going to twist it, he said. They're going to turn it into something. It already is, Jimin interrupted. His voice wasn't loud, but it cut through everything. Jungkook looked at him more closely then. Really looked. And something felt off. You're too calm, Jungkook said. Jimin laughed softly, but it didn't reach his eyes. What do you want me to do? Panic, scream, pretend this wasn't inevitable? Jungkook stepped closer. This wasn't supposed to happen like this. No, Jimin agreed. It was. Silence stretched between them again, but this time it was different, tenser, sharper, filled with the weight of something external pressing in. They're going to call us in, Jimin said after a moment. They already did, Jungkook replied. Me first. Jimin nodded faintly, like he expected that. And he asked. They want control, Jungkook said. Damage management, statements, denials. Jimin's lips pressed into a thin line. Of course they do. Jungkook hesitated. They'll probably want us to say it's nothing, he added carefully, that it was just part of the experiment. But Jimin didn't respond immediately. He just stared at the phone screen again, the reflection of the video flickering in his eyes. Isn't that what you wanted? Jungkook asked quietly. Jimin looked up. And for the first time since Jungkook walked in, the calm cracked. Don't, Jimin said, his voice sharp. Don't throw that back at me right now. I'm not, Jungkook replied quickly. I'm just asking. Jimin ran a hand through his hair, frustration finally surfacing. I wanted control, he said. There's a difference. And now we don't have it. No, Jimin agreed. Now we don't. The reality settled in fully. This wasn't just between them anymore. It never would be again. Jungkook exhaled slowly, trying to steady himself. So what do we do? Jimin let out a quiet laugh, shaking his head. You keep asking that like there's a good answer. Then give me a bad one. Jimin looked at him. Long. Hard. And then. We lie. The word hit like a drop in temperature. Jungkook's chest tightened. You don't mean that. Jimin's gaze didn't waver. We deny it. We say it was AI exaggeration, misinterpretation. We shut it down before it turns into something bigger. Jungkook stared at him. You want to erase it. I want to protect us. By pretending it's not real. Yes. The certainty in his voice cut deep. Jungkook shook his head slowly. I can't do that. Jimin's expression hardened slightly. You might not have a choice. There's always a choice. Not when other people control the narrative, Jimin shot back. Jungkook stepped closer, frustration rising again. Then we take it back. Jimin frowned. What does that even mean? It means we don't let them twist it into something fake, Jungkook said. We tell the truth before they can turn it into a lie. Jimin's eyes widened slightly. Are you insane? He whispered. Do you hear yourself right now? I hear myself clearly, Jungkook replied, for once. Jimin let out a sharp breath, packing once before turning back. You think the truth is going to fix this? He demanded. You think people are just going to accept it and move on? I think it's better than living with a lie. Jimin laughed again, but this time it was sharper. You're not thinking about what comes after. And you are, Jungkook challenged. Yes, Jimin snapped. That's all I've been thinking about since last night. Their voices rose, tension snapping tight again. This isn't just about us anymore, Jimin continued. It's about everything connected to us, the team, the image, the expectations. And where do we fit into that? Jungkook interrupted. Jimin froze. The question hit deeper than anything else. Jungkook's voice dropped, quieter now, but more intense. At what point do we get to matter in our own story? Jimin's breath faltered. You do matter, he said, but it sounded weaker than he intended. Not if we erase this, Jungkook replied. Silence fell again. Heavy, complicated, unforgiving. Jimin looked at him, really looked at him, and for a moment everything else faded. The noise, the pressure, the expectations, all of it. You're asking me to choose, Jimin said softly. Jungkook didn't deny it. Yes. Jimin's chest tightened. Between what's safe and what's real. Jungkook nodded. Jimin closed his eyes briefly, the weight of it pressing down hard. When he opened them again, they were filled with something conflicted, something fragile. You don't even know if this will survive the truth, he said. Jungkook's voice softened. Maybe not. Jimin swallowed. Then why risk it? Jungkook held his gaze. Because it deserves a chance to exist. The words lingered. And for a moment, Jimin didn't have an answer. Only the feeling that whatever decision he made next would change everything. The meeting room felt colder than the hallway. Jimin stepped in without waiting to be called, Jungkook right behind him, the door closing with a soft click that somehow sounded louder than anything they had argued about minutes ago. The executives were already seated, their expressions unreadable, their posture too controlled, like they had rehearsed this moment. Sit, one of them said. This time, Jimin did. Jungkook didn't hesitate to follow, but the tension between them remained, sharp and unresolved, threading through the space like a wire pulled too tight. The tablet on the table lit up again. The same clip. The same voice. The same name. Jimin's name. This is spreading faster than expected, one of the managers began, calm but firm. We need to respond before it escalates further. Jimin leaned back slightly, arms crossed, his expression composed again, but Jungkook could see it, the slight tension in his jaw, the way his fingers pressed just a little too tightly into his sleeve. What kind of response? Jimin asked. A clarification, came the answer. A controlled statement. You both address it together. Emphasize that it was part of an experimental AI session, that the emotional output was artificially generated and exaggerated. Jungkook's gaze dropped briefly to the table. Then lifted again. And if we do, he asked. The room stilled. One of the executives leaned forward slightly, their tone still polite, but firmer now. This is not optional. Jungkook let out a quiet breath through his nose, something close to a laugh, but without humor. Right, he muttered. Jimin didn't look at him. He kept his focus on the people across the table. What exactly are we denying? Jimin asked carefully. The implication, the manager replied. The narrative forming online, we shut it down early. And if the narrative is already formed, Jungkook pressed. Then we redirect it. Jungkook's jaw tightened. By lying. It's not lying, another voice interjected smoothly. It's managing perception. Jungkook looked at them, something sharp flickering in his eyes. It's the same thing. Jimin inhaled slowly. Enough, he said quietly, before the tension could spike further. What exactly do you want us to say? The room relaxed slightly. A script was slid across the table. Prepared. Precise. Carefully worded. Jimin glanced down at it. Then stilled. Jungkook watched him, noticing the subtle shift immediately. What? Jungkook asked. Jimin didn't answer right away. His eyes moved slowly across the lines, taking in every word, every calculated phrase. The name used was random and holds no personal significance. That line lingered. Too long. Jimin's fingers tightened slightly around the edge of the paper. Jungkook leaned over, scanning it quickly, and then he saw it too. Something inside him snapped. No, Jungkook said immediately, pushing the paper back across the table. I'm not saying that. The room tensed again. You don't have to say it exactly like that, one of the managers replied, measured but firmer now. We can adjust the wording. I'm not saying it at all, Jungkook cut in. I'm not standing there and pretending his name means nothing. Silence fell hard. Jimin looked at him. Really looked this time. And something in his expression shifted, not shock, not surprise, something more complicated. Jungkook, Jimin said quietly, a warning in his tone. But Jungkook didn't back down. You're asking me to erase it, he said, his voice steady but intense, to erase what I felt in that moment. This isn't about what you felt, one of the executives replied sharply. This is about the consequences of what people think you felt. Jungkook let out a short, bitter laugh. That's the problem, he said. You care more about what people think than what's actually real. We care about protecting everything you've built. And what if this is part of what I've built? Jungkook shot back. That question landed heavier than expected. Jimin's breath caught slightly. The room fell into a deeper silence. You're not thinking clearly, someone said. No, Jungkook replied, for the first time I am. Jimin closed his eyes briefly. This was spiraling. Too fast. Too far. Stop, Jimin said, his voice low but firm. This isn't helping. Jungkook turned to him, frustration still burning. Then say something, he urged. Tell them this isn't right. Jimin hesitated. And in that hesitation, everything became more complicated. Jimin, one of the managers said, their tone softer now, persuasive. You understand the situation, you know what's at stake. Jimin swallowed. I do. Jungkook's gaze sharpened. And he pressed. Jimin looked at him. For a moment, the room disappeared again. Just like before. Just like last night. But this time, the weight was heavier. Because now, it wasn't just about feelings. It was about choice. About consequence. About what they were willing to risk. We do the statement, Jimin said finally. The words dropped quietly. But they hit like impact. Jungkook stared at him. You're serious? He asked, his voice barely controlled. Jimin didn't look away. Yes. Something cracked. Not loudly, but deeply. You said you felt it too, Jungkook said, quieter now, but more dangerous than before. Was that just something you said in the moment? Jimin's chest tightened. No, he said, it was. Then how can you stand there and… Because feeling something doesn't mean we can act on it, Jimin snapped, his composure finally breaking. It doesn't mean we get to throw everything away for it. Jungkook flinched slightly. Not from the volume, but from the meaning. I'm not asking to throw everything away, he said. It leads there, Jimin replied immediately. You just don't want to see it yet. Jungkook shook his head. No, he said, you just don't want to see anything else. The tension between them surged again, sharper than before. This isn't just about you, Jimin continued, his voice strained now. Or me, it's bigger than that. Then why does it feel like we're the only ones being asked to sacrifice something real? Jungkook shot back. Jimin didn't answer. Because he didn't have one. The silence stretched. The room watched. Waiting. Jimin inhaled slowly, forcing himself to steady. When he spoke again, his voice was quieter but heavier. If we don't control this now, we lose control completely, he said. And when that happens, it won't just be speculation. It'll be judgment, pressure, expectations we can't meet. Jungkook's gaze softened slightly, but only slightly. And lying will fix that, he asked. No, Jimin admitted, but it buys us time. Time. The word lingered. Jungkook looked down briefly, then back up. And what do we do with that time, he asked. Jimin hesitated. We figure out what this is, he said. Jungkook held his gaze. And if we already know? Jimin's breath faltered. Then we decide if it's worth everything it could cost. The honesty in that answer shifted something again. Jungkook exhaled slowly, the fight draining just slightly, not gone but changing. You're asking me to hide it, he said. I'm asking you to protect it, Jimin corrected. That made Jungkook pause. The room remained silent, watching the shift unfold. Protect it, Jungkook repeated quietly. Jimin nodded faintly. Not everything real has to be public to exist, he said. Not yet. Jungkook's chest tightened. Because part of him understood. And part of him still resisted. This isn't forever, Jimin added, softer now. It's just not now. Jungkook looked at him for a long moment. Searching. Weighing. Fighting. And then… We don't say it means nothing, Jungkook said. Jimin blinked slightly. What? I won't say your name means nothing, Jungkook continued, not even for a statement. Jimin's expression shifted again, something subtle, something almost relieved. The executives exchanged glances. That line can be adjusted, one of them said carefully. Jimin nodded slowly. We reframe it, he said. We don't deny emotion, we just don't define it. Jungkook looked at him. That was compromise. Messy. Imperfect. But real enough. Fine, Jungkook said quietly. The tension in the room eased, just slightly. But the tension between them remained. Not as sharp. Not as explosive. But deeper now. More complicated. Because this wasn't over. Not even close. As they stood to leave, Jimin paused for just a second, his voice low enough that only Jungkook could hear. This doesn't erase anything, he said. Jungkook met his gaze. It better not. And as they walked out of the room together, side by side, but carrying very different weights, one thing was clear. They hadn't lost it. But they hadn't resolved it either. They had only chosen to keep it alive a little longer. The cameras were already waiting. By the time they stepped into the press room, the atmosphere had shifted from controlled tension to something far more volatile. Lights burned too bright, too hot, and the low murmur of voices rose and fell like a restless tide. Staff moved quickly along the edges, whispering instructions, adjusting angles, checking feeds. Everything was ready. Too ready. Jungkook paused just before stepping into view. Jimin noticed. "Don't stop now," he said quietly, not looking at him. "If you hesitate, they'll see it." Jungkook let out a slow breath. "I'm not hesitating," he replied, though his voice carried a weight that betrayed him. "I'm thinking." "Then think faster," Jimin said, his tone sharper than intended. "We don't have time." That strung. Jungkook glanced at him, something flickering in his expression. "You've gotten really good at that," he muttered. "Acting like this is just another schedule." Jimin's jaw tightened slightly. "And you've gotten really bad at pretending it isn't one." The tension snapped quietly between them again. But there was no space to argue now. "Positions," a staff member called softly. That was it. No more time. They stepped forward together. The room erupted, not loudly, not chaotically, but in that controlled surge of attention that felt just as overwhelming. Cameras lifted, eyes locked onto them. Every movement, every breath, every glance was being captured, analyzed, prepared to be replayed endlessly. Jungkook felt it immediately, the shift. From private to public. From real to performance. They sat. Too close and yet not close enough. A microphone was adjusted in front of them. The sound of it clicking into place echoed louder than it should have. Jimin leaned forward slightly first. "Professional. Composed. Familiar. We understand there's been a lot of attention around a recent studio session," he began, his voice steady, practiced, carefully neutral. "We wanted to address it directly." Jungkook stared ahead, listening. Every word felt deliberate. Measured. Safe. It was part of an experimental project using AI composition, Jimin continued. The system interprets emotional cues and generates outputs that don't always reflect personal intent accurately. There it was. The framing. Jungkook's fingers curled slightly against his knee. Not a lie, but not the truth either. A space in between. "We appreciate everyone's interest," Jimin added, "but we hope people understand that not everything created in that environment should be taken literally." A pause. A subtle shift of breath. Then Jimin glanced sideways. A cue. Jungkook felt it. The moment. His turn. The room seemed to lean in without moving. He swallowed. For a second, the words on the prepared script echoed in his mind, but they didn't fit anymore, not after everything, not after the way the music had sounded, not after the way Jimin had said, "I feel it too." Jungkook leaned forward slightly. "We were testing something new," he began, his voice calm, but deeper than usual, grounded in something real. "And sometimes, when you do that, things come out more honest than you expect." Jimin's eyes flickered toward him. "That wasn't in the script." Jungkook didn't look back. "The system used a name," he continued, "a name that matters to me." A ripple moved through the room. Barely visible. But there. Jimin's breath stilled. "And I think," Jungkook paused, choosing his words carefully, but not carefully enough to hide everything. "I think what people heard wasn't just the AI. Silence. Heavy. Charged. The kind that makes every second stretch." Jimin's pulse spiked. That wasn't controlled. That wasn't safe. Jungkook finally turned his head slightly, just enough to meet Jimin's eyes for the briefest moment. "Not long, but enough." "But it also doesn't mean everything people are assuming," Jungkook added, his tone softening slightly, pulling back just enough to keep the balance. "Some things are complicated, and not everything needs to be defined right away." There it was. The compromise. Messy. Incomplete. But honest in a way that mattered. The room exhaled collectively, tension shifting into something else, curiosity, speculation, something harder to control. Jimin sat still. Too still. Because what Jungkook had just done was walk a line so fine it almost didn't exist. The moderator stepped in quickly, trying to regain structure. "We'll take a few questions." Of course they would. Hands went up immediately. Too many. Too eager. A reporter was chosen. "Are you saying the emotions expressed in the song were real?" The question landed exactly where everyone expected it to. Jimin didn't hesitate this time. "They were part of a creative process," he replied smoothly. "Emotion is often amplified in those environments." Safe. Careful, but not fully dismissive. Another hand. "Then why use that specific name?" "A beat." Jimin opened his mouth. But Jungkook spoke first. "Because it's important to me." The room shifted again. Jimin turned his head slightly, his eyes sharpening. Jungkook didn't back down. A third question came, more direct, more dangerous. "Is there something more between you that fans are picking up on?" This time, the silence stretched longer. Jimin felt it. The edge. The breaking point. He leaned forward again, his voice calm but firmer now. "What people see or interpret is up to them," he said, "but we're not here to label something that isn't clearly defined." Jungkook watched him. That word again. Defined. It lingered. The questions continued, circling the same center, probing, pushing, trying to force clarity where there was none. And through it all, they stayed balanced. Careful. Measured. But not untouched. Every answer left something unsaid. Every glance carried something unspoken. By the time it ended, the tension hadn't disappeared. It had evolved. Outside, the world would take their words and turn them into 1,000 different narratives. Inside, the truth remained exactly where it had been. Unresolved. Alive. As they stood and stepped away from the table, the lights dimmed slightly, the noise rising again as staff moved to close the session. Jungkook exhaled slowly, tension finally slipping from his shoulders, but not completely. Jimin walked beside him in silence. They didn't speak until they reached the quieter hallway beyond. Then, "That wasn't the script," Jimin said. His voice wasn't angry, but it wasn't calm either. Jungkook glanced at him. "I didn't break it," he replied. "I adjusted it." Jimin let out a quiet breath. "You pushed it." "Not enough to lose control," Jungkook said. Jimin stopped walking. Jungkook took another step before realizing, then turned back. Jimin was watching him. Closely. "You keep doing that," Jimin said. "Doing what?" "Walking right up to the edge and acting like you're not going to fall." Jungkook held his gaze. "Maybe I'm not afraid of falling anymore." Jimin's expression shifted. Something complicated. Something fragile. "You should be," he said quietly. Jungkook shook his head slightly. "Maybe," he admitted, "but not enough to pretend I'm not already standing there." The words settled between them again. Familiar now. Heavy but not suffocating. Jimin stepped closer. Not as close as before. But enough. "You made it harder," he said. Jungkook didn't deny it. "I made it real." Jimin exhaled slowly, his gaze dropping for a moment before lifting again. "It was already real," he said. Jungkook's chest tightened slightly. "Then why does it still feel like we're holding back?" he asked. Jimin didn't answer immediately. Because he knew why. Because there were still lines. Still risks. Still things neither of them had crossed. "Because once we stop," Jimin said finally, "there's no version of this that stays quiet anymore." Jungkook stepped closer again. And if I don't want it to stay quiet? Jimin's breath caught slightly. The question hung there. Dangerous. Unavoidable. Then you're asking for something I'm not sure I'm ready to give, Jimin admitted. The honesty didn't push Jungkook away. It grounded him. Then we don't rush it, Jungkook said softly, but we don't bury it either. Jimin searched his face again, looking for doubt, for hesitation. But there was none. Only certainty. And something steady enough to hold on to. You're not going to let me run from this, are you? Jimin asked quietly. Jungkook shook his head. No. Jimin let out a slow breath. Then don't let me do it alone. The words were quiet, but they changed everything again. Jungkook's expression softened. I won't. And this time, the silence that followed didn't feel like avoidance. It felt like something building. Something inevitable. Something neither of them could stop anymore. The headlines exploded before the day even ended. By the time they returned to the private lounge, screens were already filled with fragments of what they had said, cut, rearranged, amplified. Clips looped endlessly, captions growing bolder with each repost, each interpretation drifting further from what had actually happened. Jungkook stood near the window, staring at the city below, but not really seeing it. Behind him, the muted television continued to replay his voice. A name that matters to me. Over and over again. Jimin turned it off. The silence that followed wasn't relief, it was heavier. You shouldn't watch it, Jimin said quietly. Jungkook didn't turn around. I'm not watching it, he replied. I'm hearing it. Jimin leaned back against the table, arms crossed, his posture composed, but his eyes unsettled. They're already dissecting every word, he said. There's no version of this that stays contained anymore. Jungkook finally turned. I know. There was no panic in his voice. And that made it worse. Jimin studied him carefully. You don't sound surprised. I'm not, Jungkook admitted. This was always going to happen the moment it got out. Jimin exhaled slowly, frustration simmering just beneath the surface. Then, why does it feel like you wanted it to? The question lingered. Job. Uncomfortable. Jungkook held his gaze. Maybe a part of me did. That landed harder than anything else. Jimin's jaw tightened. You realize what you're saying, right? Yes. And you're okay with it? Jungkook hesitated. Not long. But long enough. I'm okay with not hiding anymore, he said. Jimin laughed quietly, but there was no humor in it. You say that like hiding was a choice I enjoyed. Jungkook stepped closer. Then why does it still feel like you're choosing it now? Jimin's eyes flashed. Because I'm trying to keep this from turning into something we can't control, he snapped. You think I don't feel the pressure building? You think I don't see where this is going? Jungkook didn't back down. And where is it going? Jimin gestured toward the blank television screen, his voice tightening. Out there, he said. Into speculation, into narratives we don't get to shape, into expectations we can't meet without breaking something. Jungkook's expression hardened slightly, or into the truth. Jimin shook his head immediately. You keep saying that like the truth is simple. It is, Jungkook replied. We just make it complicated. Jimin stared at him. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Because they both knew it wasn't that simple. Not here. Not like this. You think saying it out loud fixes anything? Jimin asked finally, quieter now but more intense. You think it won't cost us something? It will, Jungkook admitted. Jimin's breath caught slightly. Then why? Because it already has, Jungkook cut in, his voice low but steady. We're already paying for it. The only difference is whether we admit it or not. The words hit deep. Jimin looked away, his composure slipping just enough to show the conflict underneath. "You're asking me to gamble everything on something that might not survive the pressure," he said. Jungkook stepped closer again. "And you're asking me to pretend something real doesn't exist just because it might not," he replied. The tension between them surged again, stronger now, fueled by everything building around them. Jimin ran a hand through his hair, packing once before stopping abruptly. "You don't understand," he said. "Once this crosses a certain line, there's no controlling it. It stops being ours." Jungkook's voice softened slightly. Maybe it was never just ours to begin with. That made Jimin stop. "Don't say that," he said quickly. "Why not?" Jungkook pressed. "We've been living in front of people for years. Every moment, every interaction, it's all been seen, interpreted, turned into something else." "That doesn't mean we give it to them completely," Jimin argued. Jungkook shook his head. "I'm not talking about giving it away," he said. "I'm talking about not losing it trying to keep it hidden." The words settled heavily between them. Jimin's chest tightened again. Because that fear of losing it was real. Too real. "And what if being honest is exactly what makes us lose it?" Jimin asked, his voice barely above a whisper now. Jungkook didn't answer immediately. Because that was the question. The one neither of them had a clear answer to. "Then at least we didn't lose it by denying it ever existed," he said finally. Jimin closed his eyes briefly, the weight of it pressing down again. "You make it sound like there's a right answer," he murmured. "There isn't," Jungkook admitted. "There's just the one we can live with." Jimin opened his eyes again, looking at him differently now. Not as someone he needed to argue against, but as someone standing on the same edge. "You're really not afraid of this, are you?" Jimin asked quietly. Jungkook hesitated, then shook his head slightly. "I am," he said. "I just don't want fear to decide everything." Jimin's expression softened just a little. "That's easy to say until it actually costs you something," he replied. Jungkook stepped closer again, close enough now that the space between them felt charged again. "Then we face that when it comes," he said. Jimin's breath caught slightly. "You don't even know what that is yet." "Neither do you," Jungkook countered. Silence. Heavy, but no longer empty. Because now it wasn't just tension, it was something building toward a point neither of them could avoid. Jimin looked at him for a long moment. Searching, weighing, fighting. And then his phone vibrated sharply in his hand. The sound cut through everything. Jimin glanced down and froze. Jungkook noticed immediately. "What is it?" Jimin didn't answer right away. His expression shifted, subtle at first, then sharper, something closer to shock. "Jimin." Slowly, Jimin turned the screen toward him. A new clip. Not from the studio. Not from the press conference. From somewhere else. Earlier. Private. Jungkook's breath caught as the audio played. "I feel it too." Jimin's voice. Clear. Undeniable. The angle was different, closer, more hidden. Someone had recorded from the hallway. Their voices, their conversation, the moment that had never been meant to exist outside that space. It was out. All of it. The silence that followed was absolute. No argument. No denial. No room left to pretend. Jungkook looked at Jimin slowly. Jimin didn't look away. "They have everything now," Jimin said quietly. "Not panicked. Not broken. Just certain." Jungkook exhaled slowly, something shifting inside him. Not fear, not exactly. Something else. Something steadier. "Then there's nothing left to hide," he said. Jimin's eyes flickered. That line had been crossed. Completely. Irreversibly. And for the first time since all of this began, the fear didn't feel like the only thing left. There was something else now. Something clearer. Something that didn't need to be pulled out by an AI or caught in a hidden recording. Something that had been there all along. Jimin took a slow breath, then stepped closer, not hesitating this time, not pulling back. You realize what happens next, he said quietly. Jungkook nodded. Yeah. Jimin held his gaze. And you're still not going to run. Jungkook's answer came without hesitation. No. Jimin studied him for a moment longer. Then, neither am I. The words were simple, but they changed everything. Because this time, it wasn't just about feeling it, or admitting it, or protecting it. It was about standing in it. Together. No matter what came next, the storm didn't wait. It broke all at once. By the time the clip finished replaying on Jimin's phone, notifications were already flooding in, messages stacking over each other, so fast they blurred into a constant vibration, like the world itself was shaking in his hand. Neither of them moved. Neither of them spoke. Because there was nothing left to soften the impact. So this is it, Jimin said quietly. Not a question. Not fear. Just recognition. Jungkook watched him carefully, searching for hesitation, for that instinct to pull back, but it wasn't there anymore. What replaced it was something steadier, not calm, not acceptance. Resolve. Yeah, Jungkook answered. The words settled heavily between them. Outside, footsteps rushed past the hallway, voices sharper now, urgent. Someone knocked hard against the door before pushing it open without waiting. We need both of you now. The tone wasn't controlled anymore. It was breaking. Jimin didn't even look back. Give us a minute. You don't have a minute, the staff member insisted. This is escalating faster than. I said a minute, Jimin repeated, firmer this time. The door closed again, reluctantly. Silence rushed back in. Jord. Fragile. Jungkook stepped closer, his voice lower now, more grounded than before. They're going to push harder this time. Jimin let out a slow breath. I know. No more half statements, Jungkook added. No more space in between. Jimin nodded faintly. That's what happens when the truth leaks instead of being chosen, he said. Jungkook's jaw tightened slightly. Then maybe we should have chosen it sooner. Jimin gave a small, almost tired smile. Maybe. The word lingered, with a weight of regret neither of them could fully unpack right now. Another knock. Sharper. Now. This time they didn't argue. They moved. The hallway was chaos compared to before, staff moving quickly, voices overlapping, screens lit up everywhere with the same clips, the same headlines, the same questions growing louder with every second. Jungkook caught fragments as they passed. Confirmed audio. Not speculation anymore. Public statement required immediately. Everything was accelerating. They were led into a larger conference room this time. More people. More pressure. No space left for careful distance. The moment they stepped in, all eyes turned to them. You've seen it, one of the executives said, not bothering with introductions or formalities anymore. Jimin nodded once, yes. And you understand what this means. Another nod. Jungkook didn't speak. He didn't need to. The tension in the room was already thick enough. We need a full denial, someone said immediately. Not partial, not implied, clear, direct, immediate. No. The word cut through the room before anyone else could speak. Jimin. Every head turned toward him. Jungkook's eyes flickered in surprise. That hadn't been discussed. Not like this. We can't deny something that's already confirmed, Jimin continued, his voice calm but firm. It will collapse immediately. That doesn't matter, another voice snapped. What matters is control. You've already lost control, Jimin interrupted. The room went still. That was the first time anyone had said it out loud. And it landed exactly how it should. Jungkook watched him, something shifting in his chest, something sharp, something almost like recognition. Jimin wasn't just reacting anymore. He was deciding. We move differently now, Jimin continued, his gaze steady. If we push a denial, it turns into a scandal. If we acknowledge it without framing, it turns into speculation. Either way, we don't get to erase it. Silence. Heavy. Uncomfortable. But we can still define it, Jimin added. Jungkook's breath caught slightly. That word again. Define. And how do you suggest we do that? One of the executives asked, their tone tighter now. Jimin hesitated. For just a second. Jungkook saw it. Felt it. The weight of what came next. Then, we tell the truth, Jimin said. The room erupted. Not loudly, but sharply. Immediate objections, overlapping voices, tension snapping all at once. That's not an option. You're not thinking about the consequences. This affects more than just. Enough. This time, Jungkook spoke. And the room stilled again. Because there was something different in his voice now. Not frustration. Not defiance. Certainty. You've been asking us to control something that was never yours to control, he said, his gaze moving across the room. And now that it's out, you want to rewrite it. No one interrupted. Because no one could deny it. Jungkook stepped forward slightly. We're not going to lie about it, he continued. Jimin didn't look at him. But he didn't stop him either. That alone said everything. You think telling the truth will make this better? Someone challenged. No, Jungkook replied, I think it will make it real. The silence that followed was heavier than anything before. Because that was the shift. From damage control to ownership. Jimin exhaled slowly, then stepped forward beside him. Not behind. Not separate. Beside. We're not labeling it beyond what it is, Jimin said. We're not turning it into something bigger or smaller to fit a narrative. We're just not denying it. The room struggled to process that. Because it wasn't clean. It wasn't controlled. But it was solid. And if that leads to more speculation, someone pressed. It will, Jimin admitted. Then why risk it? Jimin's voice softened slightly. Because it's already happening, he said. The only difference is whether we stand in it or let it drag us. Jungkook glanced at him. And in that moment, something settled. Not the chaos. Not the pressure. But between them. The decision was no longer divided. It was shared. Another silence fell. Longer this time. Heavier. Until finally. Then we proceed carefully, one of the executives said slowly, reluctantly. No explicit confirmation, no denial. A statement that acknowledges emotional authenticity without definition. Jimin nodded once. That's what we've been doing, he said. Jungkook added quietly, now we just stop holding back inside it. The compromise was fragile. But it was enough. For now. The meeting ended without resolution, but with direction. And that was more dangerous. Because now, the next step wasn't about control. It was about exposure. As they stepped out of the room again, the noise returned immediately. Phones ringing, staff moving, the world still spinning too fast. But between them, there was a strange kind of stillness. Jimin walked a few steps ahead this time, then stopped. Jungkook slowed, watching him. Jimin turned. His expression wasn't guarded anymore. Not like before. You didn't hesitate, Jimin said quietly. Jungkook shook his head. Neither did you. Jimin let out a small breath. Yeah, he admitted. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Jimin stepped closer. Close enough that the chaos around them faded again. You realize there's no going back now, he said. Jungkook met his gaze. I know. Jimin searched his eyes, looking for doubt, for regret, for anything that might break under pressure. But there was none. Only that same steady certainty. Then don't let go, Jimin said, softer now. Jungkook's expression shifted, something warmer breaking through the tension. I won't. And for the first time since everything began. Not the AI. Not the music. Not the leaks. Not the pressure. But this moment felt like the most honest thing they had. Because this time, nothing pulled it out of them. They chose it. The statement went live at exactly 7:00 p.m. No countdown, no warning, just a quiet push into the world, and then everything ignited. Jungkook watched it happen in real time. The screen in front of him refreshed over and over again, comments multiplying, interpretations colliding, headlines forming faster than he could read them. Some called it honesty, some called it evasion, some called it confirmation disguised as ambiguity. It was exactly what they expected. And still, it felt overwhelming. Across the room, Jimin stood with his back against the wall, arms folded tightly, not defensive, but contained, like he was holding something in place beneath the surface. His eyes were fixed on nothing in particular, but Jungkook could tell he was listening to everything. Say something, Jungkook murmured, not looking away from the screen. Jimin let out a slow breath. About what? About this, Jungkook replied, finally turning. About the fact that we just stepped into something we can't step out of. Jimin gave a faint, tired smile. You say that like we weren't already in it. Jungkook huffed quietly. We were on the edge before. And now. Jungkook met his eyes. Now we jumped. The words settled between them, heavier than before, but not suffocating. Jimin pushed himself off the wall, walking slowly toward him, each step deliberate, measured. You're not panicking, he observed. Jungkook shrugged slightly. Should I be? Jimin tilted his head, studying him. I thought you would be. Jungkook let out a quiet breath. I was, he admitted, before. Before what? Jungkook hesitated. Then. Before you stood next to me in that room and didn't back down. The admission caught Jimin off guard. He blinked, something shifting in his expression, something softer breaking through the tension. I almost did, Jimin said quietly. Jungkook shook his head, but you didn't. Jimin looked at him for a long moment. Neither did you. Silence followed. But it wasn't empty. It was full of everything they had just done, everything they had just risked, everything that was now unfolding outside of them. Jungkook leaned back against the table, crossing his arms, his gaze dropping briefly before lifting again. Do you regret it? He asked. Jimin didn't answer right away. He turned slightly, glancing at the screen, at the chaos they had just released into the world. Then back at Jungkook. No, he said. The answer was steady. Certain. Jungkook's chest tightened slightly, not in fear, but in something deeper, something more grounding. Good, he murmured. Jimin exhaled slowly, his shoulders relaxing just a fraction. That doesn't mean I'm not worried, he added. Jungkook nodded. I know. A pause. Then Jimin stepped closer again, his voice lowering slightly. "This isn't just going to stay as speculation anymore," he said. "People are going to start expecting something from us." Jungkook's brow furrowed. "Like what?" Jimin gave a small, humorless laugh. "Clarity," he said. "Definition, a direction." Jungkook let that sink in. "And what do we give them?" he asked. Jimin held his gaze. "Nothing they can box in." Jungkook's lips twitched slightly, not quite a smile, but close. "You've thought about this?" "I've had to," Jimin replied. Jungkook studied him for a moment, then pushed himself off the table, closing the distance again. "And what about us?" he asked quietly. "What do we give each other?" That question lingered longer. Because it wasn't about the world anymore. It was about them. Jimin's breath caught slightly. "You're really not going to let this stay surface level, are you?" he asked softly. Jungkook shook his head. "No." Jimin let out a slow breath, his gaze dropping briefly before lifting again. "Then don't expect easy answers," he said. "I'm not looking for easy," Jungkook replied. "I'm looking for real." The word hit differently now. "Heavier." Jimin stepped closer. Close enough that the tension shifted again, not sharp, not explosive, but charged in a quieter, more dangerous way. "You already know what this feels like," Jimin said. "Why are you still asking?" Jungkook didn't look away, because feeling something isn't the same as understanding what it means. Jimin's eyes flickered. "And you think I understand it?" he asked. "I think you understand it better than you want to admit," Jungkook said. Jimin let out a quiet breath, something almost like a laugh escaping him. "You always do that," he murmured. "Do what?" "Push," Jimin replied, "right when I'm trying to hold something in place." Jungkook's voice softened. "Maybe it's not meant to stay in place." Jimin shook his head slightly. "Or maybe I'm the only one trying to keep it from falling apart." Jungkook stepped closer. "And maybe you don't have to do that alone." The words landed gently, but they carried weight. Jimin looked at him. Really looked. And for a moment, everything else faded again. The noise, the pressure, the expectations, all of it. "You keep saying that," Jimin said quietly. "Because I mean it." Jimin's expression shifted again, something fragile, something uncertain, but not pulling away. "You don't even know what you're promising," he said. Jungkook's answer came without hesitation. "Then we figure it out." Jimin let out a slow breath, his shoulders dropping just slightly. "You make everything sound simple." "It's not simple," Jungkook replied. "It's just not impossible." That lingered. Jimin's gaze softened again. And for the first time since the statement went live, something in the room shifted. Not the tension, not the pressure, but the space between them. Less guarded. More opened. "Come here," Jimin said quietly. Jungkook blinked slightly. "What?" Jimin stepped closer himself, closing the distance completely this time. "I said come here," he repeated, softer now. Jungkook didn't hesitate. He moved. And suddenly, there was no space left between them. No room for deflection. No distance to hide behind. Jimin's voice dropped to almost a whisper. "You asked what we give each other," he said. Jungkook's heart pounded. "Yeah." Jimin held his gaze. "This," he said. And for a moment, nothing else existed. No cameras. No headlines. No expectations. Just the quiet, undeniable truth that had been building, piece by piece, moment by moment, until it couldn't be ignored anymore. Jungkook didn't pull away. Neither did Jimin. Because this time, there was no reason to. And whatever came next, they were already standing in it. Morning arrived without permission. The storm outside had quieted, but the world hadn't. Jungkook woke before the light fully settled into the room, the faint grey of dawn stretching across the floor like something fragile, something that could still be broken if touched too roughly. For a moment, he didn't move, he just listened. No notifications, no voices, no pressure crashing in all at once. Just silence. Real silence. He turned his head slightly. Jimin was still there. Not across the room, not distant, not guarded, just there resting on his side, his breathing slow and steady, like the chaos of the night before had never reached him. But Jungkook knew better. Jimin didn't escape things. He endured them. Quietly. Jungkook watched him for a long moment, something tightening in his chest, not fear, not uncertainty, but something gentler. Something that had finally found space to exist without being pushed aside. He shifted slightly, careful not to disturb him. But Jimin stirred anyway. His eyes opened slowly, unfocused at first, then sharpening as they found Jungkook. "You're staring," Jimin murmured, his voice rough with sleep. Jungkook huffed quietly, "You're awake." "Barely," Jimin replied, blinking once before exhaling. "What time is it?" "Early." Jimin nodded faintly, like that was enough information, then closed his eyes again, but only for a second before opening them once more. "You didn't sleep much," he said. It wasn't a question. Jungkook didn't deny it, neither did you. Jimin's lips curved slightly, not quite a smile. "I sleep better than you think." Jungkook tilted his head, "Even after everything." Jimin was quiet for a moment. Then, "Yeah," he said softly, "because for the first time, nothing feels unfinished." That made Jungkook pause. Unfinished. That word used to follow them everywhere. Conversations cut short, feelings left unspoken, moments that almost meant something but never fully crossed the line. But now, Jungkook let out a slow breath. "It doesn't feel unfinished to me either." Jimin's gaze softened, something quieter settling in his expression. "Good," he said. They stayed like that for a while, no urgency, no pressure to fill the silence, just presence. Then the world came back. A phone buzzing. Once, twice, then endlessly. Jimin exhaled, pushing himself up slightly, running a hand through his hair. There it is. Jungkook reached for his own phone, glancing at the screen. The reactions hadn't slowed overnight. They had multiplied, deepened, divided into something more complex than simple speculation. Some understood. Some questioned. Some demanded. But none of it felt as overwhelming as before. Because now, they weren't reacting. They had already chosen. Jimin stood, stretching slightly, then walked toward the window. The city was waking up, unaware of how much had already shifted within it. Or maybe not unaware. Maybe just adjusting. "You know this doesn't end here," Jimin said quietly, his back still turned. Jungkook sat up, watching him. "I know." Jimin's shoulders rose and fell with a slow breath. "There's going to be more questions, more pressure, more moments where this," he paused briefly, "gets pulled apart and analyzed until it barely looks like what it is." Jungkook nodded, "Probably." Jimin turned slightly, glancing at him over his shoulder. "And you're still okay with it?" Jungkook didn't hesitate. "Yeah." Jimin studied him for a second, like he was searching for cracks, for hesitation, but there wasn't any. "Why?" Jimin asked. Jungkook stood, closing the distance between them slowly. "Because it's not just theirs to analyze," he said, "it's ours to live." The words settled between them, steady and grounded. Jimin turned fully now, facing him. "And if it gets messy?" he asked. Jungkook's expression softened. "Then it gets messy." Jimin let out a quiet breath, something almost like a laugh slipping through. "You make it sound so easy." Jungkook shook his head. "It's not easy." Then what is it? Jungkook held his gaze. Worth it. That was it. No dramatic declarations. No perfectly crafted lines. Just truth. Jimin looked at him for a long moment. Then he stepped closer. Not hesitating. Not holding back. Yeah, he said quietly, it is. The space between them felt different now, not charged with uncertainty, not heavy with things left unsaid, but full in a way that didn't demand anything more. Outside, the world would keep moving. There would be statements, interviews, interpretations, headlines that twisted and stretched what had happened into something easier to consume. But inside this moment, none of that mattered. Because this wasn't a performance. It wasn't a concept. It wasn't something created by an algorithm or shaped by expectation. It was real. Jungkook glanced at the phone in his hand one last time, then set it down on the table without another look. Jimin noticed. You're ignoring it, he asked. For now, Jungkook replied. Jimin nodded slowly. Good. Another quiet moment passed. Then, what happens next? Jimin asked. Jungkook thought about it. Not in terms of strategy. Not in terms of control. But in something simpler. Something honest. We keep going, he said. Jimin tilted his head slightly. That's it. Jungkook smiled faintly. That's everything. Jimin held his gaze. And for the first time, there was no question behind it. No hesitation. No fear trying to pull it back. Then let's go, he said. Not into the chaos. Not into the expectations. But forward. Together. And somewhere, buried beneath the noise of the world and the echo of a song that had once revealed too much, there was something quieter. Something stronger. Something that didn't need to be explained to be understood. Because some truths don't need perfect words. They just need to be chosen. And this time, they were.